Hello, everyone. On this episode of Opolis Public Radio, we're going to dig into what it's like to be a member of the Opolis Employment Commons. We're going to talk a lot about decentralized autonomous organizations, or for the acronym nerds, the DAOs of our space, and the concept of Peeps Democracy. So joining me for this episode, I've got the pleasure and honor of having Bill Warren, the co-founder of Peeps Democracy, with me. Peeps is launching a new platform, PoolParty. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about that, where DAOs meet DeFi. So with PoolParty, you'll save together for a shared goal and purpose, all while earning interest. Bunch of governance components there. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Good to see you, Bill.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
So a little bit more about that. The PoolParty stuff is kind of intriguing. Actually, let's before we do that, let me kind of finish your bio. How about that? So,
all right, yeah.
Okay, so Peeps Democracy is the original.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and PoolParty's come out of that. So being the co-founder of Peeps Democracy, why don't we start with that? So before your days of Peeps, you were we refer to you as a recovering attorney. I think we've agreed.
Yep, that's right.
So tell us a little bit about your sort of entrance into blockchains and sort of the advent of Peeps.
Yeah. So kind of like most people in this world, I'd heard of Bitcoin, and started reading about it while I was in law school several years ago, but Bitcoin wasn't compelling to me at all.
Why not?
So just because it was like a digital form of gold. So I was like, okay,
You don't like gold?
I'm not a gold guy, to be honest. I'm not, it's like, all right, this is just another commodity that people can trade and store wealth in. Like, good for them. But it was reading the Ethereum white paper in 2015 where I was like, okay, now blockchain is interesting because it's not just like digital gold that we can send from one person to another. It's any asset that we can program rules into and then have other rules for transferring it between people. And I was like, this is really going to be what revolutionizes the financial system and governance and all of that.
Okay, so when you first read the white paper in 2015, are you telling me that you actually understood it?
I mean, I got the concept of what the smart contracts were and saw the beginnings of something like this is really going to revolutionize how we do finance for sure. Because I was kind of towards the end of law school and really kind of a governance and technology and finance nerd. And so it was the first time where somebody had talked about blockchain, but in a way that it touched my world and was doing something potentially cool for my world.
You were ahead of the curve because when I first read it, I also read it I think I actually saw it in 2014.
Yeah.
There was
an earlier version. Yeah.
Well, I interestingly, I had met Vitalik's father at an executives retreat thing in early 2014. And then we had kind of stayed friends. And I think I got the first copy of it, or the first copy that I saw was sometime late in 2014. And I'll be honest, if I look back at my comprehension of all things sort of blockchain Web3, I didn't get it. I thought, I just didn't get it. It didn't click for me. It took probably until mid 2016 to get it and go, oh,
yeah.
Oh, wait, this is going to change everything.
Yep.
Whereas before, I think for me, it was more just, it's an automation technology. I was sort of stuck in the startup founder sort of this is a new tech and we're going to get rich and create the next Uber on this thing. And it's
right.
like, wait a minute, if this is successful, actually Uber goes away.
Yeah. I'm not sure like anybody grasped it that deeply. For me, it was really focused on like smart contracts, and that's like a misleading term because a smart contract isn't a contract necessarily.
I've heard other attorney friends of mine say they're not smart and they're not really contracts. So,
so I'd say they're smart. They're just not necessarily contracts. But
they're not smart in they're not smart like AI smart. I mean, they're smart. They're smart that they can be programmed to have sort of binary outcomes and sort of situational outcomes, but they're not really like human nuance of smart.
No. But in the law world, that's where like so much of the stuff doesn't really require AI smarts. And a lot of times, especially for big corporations, which, I worked with quite a bit, there are people whose job it is just to like read these contracts that sit in a drawer and go, all right, this month we've got to pay this person this amount. And the fact that like now we're talking Ethereum and blockchain, that this could all be done and both parties could see the code online and see how that money was being programmed and like program and conditions to it. Like for the law world and the contract world, that was just like the game changer of like, if people use this.
It creates a level of transparency that like, even accountability, even like, I mean, it really, I mean, if you want to talk about human frailties in law, right? And paying or not paying obligations and simplifying, I guess, the notion of becoming trustless, where like, I don't have to trust you to be able to pay, right? Whatever it is that you've obligated to pay, that the contract actually acts as that non-human intermediary that is trustless. It doesn't need the permission from either party to do its job. It just does it. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's really exciting.
So you were in law school when you first heard about this?
Yeah, I was like at the end of law school. So I knew I was going to a big firm after that to do kind of like law and tech stuff. Yeah. But kind of like hearing about it and getting interested, I like tried to teach myself Solidity on the side and like followed the world. And then when I met Aaron Wright from Open Law, we started, talking about what became Peeps Democracy, since he had been really thinking about like blockchain and politics for a while. And that's
shout out to Aaron, by the way. Aaron, Wright, a trailblazer in a lot of respects in the legal world of blockchains and whatnot. So
so that's where like the more we started talking about it, the more it was like, all right, this is worth leaving my highly overpaid law job to like go do and explore. And out of that, Peeps Democracy was born.
So so it's worthwhile to leave your overpaid law job. What motivates you then? Like what's your driving factor? Because like, it's an interesting thing. All the different characters that I meet in the blockchain and Web3 space are very different than the characters that I've met in the tech startup space, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, not that there aren't maybe some Venn diagram overlaps or something, but like it's not generally the same persona. And I'm always really interested to know more about like why, right? Like what's your motivation? Like what's the thing that would cause a person to do that, right? Because like you could be stacking cash and buying Bitcoin and doing whatever you want, right? But instead you're choosing to sort of like go down this path. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So for me, it was like a combo of wanting to do something that created a net benefit for the world. Like as a lawyer advising startups and doing like tech deals, a lot of times I was moving money between like relatively wealthy, privileged people already. And that came with like some really kind of cool intellectual challenges and pieces, but it wasn't very satisfying from like a end of the day, feel like I left the world a better place. Yeah, right. It was, I was fortunate that I never like had to work for big oil and protecting them against like lawsuits or anything, but it wasn't satisfying. So, with Peeps, I was really motivated by the prospect of creating something that could benefit people and really empower people to have more control over their own destinies, and especially for communities to have more control over the community destiny and coordinate more effectively and in a trustless environment. So it's that kind of like, moral imperative with the added bonus of like, I think governance is cool. I think the tech and coding and solidity is cool. So I don't want to.
Yeah, you know how rare of a person it is to say, I think governance is cool.
Yeah, right. It is. But
I mean,
I don't want
go ahead.
people to think like it's just like some moral mission that keeps me driven. The cool factor helps a lot, Well,
you're interested in the subject matter, and at the same time, it sounds like what you're saying is that there's actually some sort of human progress component to this that we can, I mean, your why is not that different than mine. I mean, I could be doing a lot of other things that would be probably more economically rewarding in the short term. But I think you're right that the convergence of, when you mentioned the law, finance, and technology, when you look at the overlap of those three things and what Web3 really brings to sort of the possibilities table, it's like a big deal. Like, and it's not like well, let's put it this way. I think from my view, it's like there's like missing ingredients in a recipe, right? Like, so other startups that I've been a part of historically have, it's like, well, gosh, we're going to end up like really centralized and highly controlling, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and all these problems are going to. There's like these little missing links, right? Like even big quote success stories like Uber and Lyft, right? They're not really that sustainable, and the stakeholders or the shareholders are never going to own that, right? Like they're never going to say like, well, we could do this better, we could do it democratically, we could do it more fair, right? Because that's not the game. That's a totally different thing. So I think it seems to me like this might actually be it. Do you think that Web3 is that thing, and that's really why you're doing this? Because it's really worth kind of stepping out to see what these possibilities are? Oh, Bill, did we lose you? All right. Well, while we're talking about, while we're waiting for Bill to jump back in, it looks like we've lost him just for a minute. I'll go ahead and give some quick updates on this. So everyone will be excited to know that our rewards program is on track to have the paper launched or distributed here probably sometime in early Q4. And then the actual program itself, we're slated to go live in Q4 or early Q1 of next year. So the rewards program is sort of a teaser, is going to be really a tokenization of the commons, and one that will reward individuals for consumption in for their membership. So it's quite coming together quite well. The collaboration that we've had between the different parties has been amazing, frankly. So we've had experts from every corner of the community that you can think of contributing to this rewards program to make sure that it's both sustainable, meaning that it's creating economic value and reasons for people to continue their patronage of the commons. And then secondarily, it's also got many different components of benevolence baked into it, so that ultimately the commons never becomes hijacked or distorted in its purpose of providing the public good infrastructure of employment to its membership and individuals. Hey, Bill, it looks like you're back.
Yeah. Sorry, our Wi-Fi dropped. I think.
Well, you were like this. You were like, I'm just kidding.
Running away. Yeah.
I was like, whoa, hopefully there's no wildfires or anything.
No. We're lucky here on the East Coast.
All right, cool. So why don't you pick back up where I was? Did you? What's the last part that you had kind of heard before your Wi-Fi dropped?
Just about the stakeholders, and shareholders of Uber and Lyft, right?
Well, they're governance issues, right?
Yeah,
it's a governance issue. I mean, if you want to look at it purely from an economic standpoint, it's a game design issue.
Yeah.
Right? Because they just don't have the incentives to really care about anything else aside from what their economic interests are. And they're going to make the operational and economic decisions that benefit the shareholders, which is actually legally required anyway. So it's a really interesting, capitalism as a modern sport is a really interesting thing to unpack, because everybody decries it for being evil, and when I look at it, I just say, well, it's just doing what it's designed to do.
Yeah, and I think the highly shareholder focused capitalism that really came about since the 70s is like the particular problem, and that's what's so cool about tokenization and some of the experiments we're seeing now in the DAO space. It's like we can, with Web3, really expand to a true stakeholder capitalism, where it's not like a B Corp that's still investor focused, but we'll also think about doing good,
right?
With a DAO or some sort of tokenized community,
or a co-op,
or a co-op, right? You can have true stakeholder capitalism where
Agreed.
Everybody's incentivized.
Actually, what's really funny about my whole journey in this space is the stakeholdership capitalism is the most exciting thing to me.
Yeah.
Because what I think is really interesting in today's binary political space is we have, you have frankly a lot of people who are really ignorant about economics on all sides.
Yep.
And they don't understand game design or incentives. They're just sort of participating really unwittingly in these games, right? And whether you're an employee working for a corporation and you're an Uber driver and you're whatever, or you're just a raging communist that believes that capitalism is intrinsically evil, I think it's kind of all really interesting to watch. And I try to put all judgments aside on this, because I think humans are actually really simple in that we're just going to do what we're incentivized to do from a hierarchy of needs. So sort of self-preservation, survival, economics and greed is certainly a dimension that's advented, I think, much more over the past, since the Industrial Revolution, frankly.
Yeah.
And sort of the concentration of power in these large sort of monopoly type businesses like oil and steel and things like that. But, it's interesting to see the possibilities now, this multidimensional deal, and unpacking capitalism and just understanding how it works and then repacking it into the stakeholdership dynamics really only can work through tokenization. I'm not sure that there's another way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there is. It'd just be highly inefficient. Right?
It would be highly inefficient, and it would be burdened by regulatory red tape in ways that I don't think would be tenable.
Yeah. Right. Versus that's the glory of Web3. Not only can you tokenize and kind of have new incentive mechanisms, but it can all be done and the rules can be transparent. And, that really opens up possibilities for communities to organize in new ways, and also for societies to organize in new ways.
So exactly. I mean, that there's the meat of it.
Yep.
That, if we can do that,
yeah.
oh my God, game over.
Yep.
So I was just while you were on your brief hiatus and with your freeze man,
Yeah.
I was sort of teasing to the community that we have the Opolis Commons token paper coming out in probably late this month, early next. I mean, it'll be early Q4 probably. And then the actual rewards program that this is geared around is going to go into place probably sometime late this year, early next. It's most likely going to be first part of January. But being a member of the Commons yourself, you're going to be a large benefactor of this payroll mining activity that we're doing. So that's actually what we're calling the block rewards that come out of each payroll cycle will be called payroll mining.
I like it.
The rewards will be distributed to different stakeholders and contributors to the value that gets sort of built into the ecosystem based on certain metrics. And there's going to be huge incentives to be early adopter of this. So congratulations and good foresight.
Thank you. Yeah. No, being part of the Commons has been a great change. One, in that it hasn't felt like a change from our old payroll provider, which is exactly what you want when you're working on technology. You don't want to be thinking about your payroll all the time. But it's also been cool to be part of the community. I think, it's Opolis and the Commons is just another good example of like how Web3 and the Ethereum space especially is just like very community focused.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. I mean, that's what we aim to design. So tell us where you came from. Tell us how you ended up here. You kind of did your thing in law school and then you ended up at Consensus, and then tell us about the advent of Peeps and then sort of how you made your way to the Commons.
Yeah. So, we ended up at Consensus to build what was originally going to be like a political giving system that was going to be issues-based and decentralized, and the idea that the people who contribute to an issue would decide where the money went, like basically which politician got it. It's a DAO or a bunch of little DAOs.
Right.
What we figured out was, given the craziness of all of this political cycle and where the Web3 community is, where the Web2 community is, DAOs for giving to politicians didn't work. So we kind of quickly went back to the drawing board and said, while DAOs don't seem to be working for giving to politicians like we originally hoped, there is kind of the rebirth of DAOs when it comes to issues or goal-based communities. And so we quickly built a product called Peeps DAO, which was just a DAO launcher focused on nonprofits and political orgs and movements, and have been running that it launched in maybe like late March, early April, and has been much more successful than our original plans.
That's good.
Yeah. And then with Peeps DAO, the couple things that we kept on hearing from people was, well, it'd be really great if we could do this in a more goal-based way, because, people are used to the Kickstarter or Patreon model. Like, people get it. And we'd love for our DAOs to be a little bit more like that. And then the other thing that we started thinking about, seeing kind of DeFi pick up, was, a lot of these DAOs, as they become successful, start sitting on a ton of money. And if you're a traditional like nonprofit or company or whatever, all of that money accrues to the benefit of the nonprofit. You as a donor or as a participant in the corporation, really don't see a ton of benefit. But again, with the power of Web3, we said, well, this is a way where, the stagnant money that sits in the DAO could earn interest, and it's up to the individual whether they want to take that interest earnings out and give it back to themselves, or give it to the DAO essentially to achieve its goals. And that was really the genesis of PoolParty, where we're like, all right, let's combine DAOs.
I love that name, by the way. I mean, it's
yeah, thank you.
It's so like perfect for like the DeFi nerd space, and like, but like make it kind of fun. PoolParty.
Yeah, we want it to be fun, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is still like very focused on people getting together to do like cool stuff together as a collective. And most of the time it's not like super serious when people are doing that.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, that's what I think is cool about all these experiments is it makes the sort of getting together and doing something purposeful together value driven too.
Yeah.
Because I think up to this point, like you mentioned B Corps earlier, or, you see a lot of foundations, not-for-profits, all this stuff in the blockchain space. And I think most of them missed it. I think, it's like you can't undermine the spirit of value creation with your legal entity, whatever that is. And, B Corps on the one hand don't really get there because it's sort of virtue signaling mostly.
Yep. Exactly.
And on the other hand of it, it's more like, well, we don't really care about profit.
Right.
And then if you don't care about profit, then I don't think you care about sustainability, or you're depending on somebody else for your sustainability, which then creates another whole set of problems that, foundations and things always have, which is, where are they going to get their funding? And it's in perpetuity, right? It's never really solved. You never become self-sustaining as the group, right? It's always dependent on something else. So that's great. I mean, so tell me, so you've been in the DAO space, Peeps Democracy, and then PoolParty came from this whole thing. What else about the DAO world is interesting to you right now? So, I mean, what got you, obviously understanding smart contracts is one component of Web3, but then DAOs is a whole other thing. How were you introduced to that? And then what is it that you see that's sort of evolving most interestingly or quickly, or what do you think the most impactful things are going to be in, say, the next chapter of this?
Yeah. So, I mean, Peeps Democracy, when we first started at Consensus, we were still in kind of like the DAO hangover period where, Aragon and DAO Stack existed, but nobody was really talking about DAOs because
I remember.
Happened.
Well, the DAO had a really bad stigma from the smart contract hack of the DAO.
Yep. Right.
And so DAOs were like, oh, we're not doing any more of those.
Yeah, right. We that's why we were originally calling it like voting, but to move money. And, that was where I got really interesting. And I think when Moloch kind of launched, it really gave a kick in the butt back to the DAO space. People kind of finally realized again, like, oh yeah, you can fix the smart contracts so that they're more secure, they're a lot simpler. And I think that's where a lot of the exciting stuff in the DAO space is happening. So, PoolParty is built off of the Moloch DAO framework. I work with DAOHaus quite a bit too, and contribute to that. And that's also
a bunch of those guys are here in Colorado.
Yeah, I know. The DAOHaus team, it seems to be like very Colorado centric.
Yeah, very Boulder,
Yeah, which is great. Maybe
they're great.
Maybe that's why I like working with them, because they've got a great attitude. But I think what's happening with DAOHaus really bringing together the Moloch DAO world and being that like single place to interact with all of your Moloch DAOs is awesome. And then the most exciting thing coming down the pike is the Moloch V3, which we're contributing to, and it's very Web3 in that it's like purely this emergent community project where a lot of different people like Peeps and DAOHaus and Open Law all realized like, we've kind of reached the limits of the current Moloch DAO framework. So we started over and are creating like a much more modular Moloch DAO. And that should really kind of like open up the DAO space to even more use cases and customization while still keeping things like pretty simple. So I'm really excited for, I think that is probably going to take another like 3 to 6 months to really kind of come together and finish the product. But once we get there, I'm just really excited about the Moloch DAO world and all of the different communities being built up around it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I remember when Amin first announced the Moloch DAO right before, it was like right before Ether 2019.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, that's really interesting because, my critique of the DAO space was similar to how I would critique Microsoft Excel, which is like, 95% of the features that you have, no one's ever going to use. And it was, it seemed like it was more of an eye candy thing than actually really functional.
Yeah.
And over-engineered, right? So like, look, that's all really cool, but like, who actually uses this? And the answer is nobody really. And outside of Web3 nerds, like literally no one. So okay, like how do we make this more friendly to kind of move into this sort of regular world space and like make it actually adoptable for average people and usable? Like that's a big, we've been talking about, usability for years and years and years in the blockchain space. So this isn't new, but it seems like that's sort of, and I hadn't even heard of Moloch V3. I've been sort of with my head in the sand with COVID and some of this, but like, that's great. The usability and modularity, like where you can actually grab like, hey, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, don't need 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 that. But like, here's the thing we need, zip it up so that you can do a rapid implementation and have a DAO stood up quickly so an average person can do it. That's really where we need to be.
Yeah. And that's been a big focus of like PoolParty and DAOHaus as well. Right. It's just making and keeping DAOs fun. I'm not sure we're going to cross the chasm to the pure Web2 folks until there's a really simple like on-off ramp for crypto that's not, $4.99 to move $10 on chain.
Right.
But, for the Web3 people who are natives, having DAOs be fun and gamey is, I think, starting to break through to the non-governance nerds. And with PoolParty, one of our hopes is because we're adding some DeFi and, we're also thinking about a rewards token, we're adding even more of that gamey element to DAOs so that there's no opportunity cost because you're earning interest on everything you put in a DAO. And two, you're earning this rewards token that might evolve someday into like a governance
something
token.
Of value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my prediction for this is if we are successful in sort of reorganizing capitalism, it's going to be because people play it because it feels like a game.
Yeah.
It's, my contribution to a DAO or to an activity or to even a company who incorporates any of these concepts. The value of these ecosystems or these efforts is going to be driven in real time by people doing certain things. And when rewards are distributed or tokens are distributed or whatever, it's sort of what would normally feel like a stock distribution, but it's not, right? It's a digital asset that has some value or no value, but
right?
there's like multi-dimensional components here.
Yeah.
And like, I think the gamification of commerce is really where this is going. And I think it's really interesting. Whether they realize it or not, we already have game theory dynamics built into our commercial experiences.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't feel like a game.
Yeah. And it's usually, gamified just to like optimize for the company,
shareholder extraction,
right?
and
Yeah.
and it's really one-sided, call it. I mean, I
Yeah.
always use this example, but like, there was a famous investor who put $10 million into Lyft and ultimately got a $1.3 billion return, something like that.
Yeah.
And the average Lyft driver doesn't make minimum wage per hour. And it's like,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
there's all this value.
Yeah.
Lyft is worth billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, but the people who actually built the thing don't get anything.
Yeah.
Which is baffling to me in like that we're in 2020 and we're still doing this. Like, and again, it's not to demonize this. The system did what it was designed to do. So it's like, look, you can't, don't cut your nose off to spite your face. I mean, there's a lot of people who have, without the value distribution, had life-changing experiences because of things like Uber and Lyft, right? So there's lots of positive that's come out of it, but we need to advance past that, right? Where it's like, okay, now how do we really create trillion-dollar ecosystems?
Yeah. And
that are really benevolent and sustainable by nature, and then sort of do these kinds of interesting things. So I think we're moving in really interesting directions. So I'm excited to get you and your crews involved as we start, taking these districts of the commons, right? Once we actually get to some level of size, there will be not individual DAOs per se, but sub-districts to the commons that will have their own governance. And that's going to be really fun to set up that, that suite of options where anybody could form one. If you're a member, you want to get other members, you could form your own sort of quasi DAO, a sub DAO, and have your own little governance to vote as a block or whatever it is that you want to do inside the main governance of the system. So that's going to be super fun.
Yeah, that will be fun. We're already doing something like DAOHaus is a really interesting experiment because it's another one of those where it's a flat organization and it's just a bunch of contributors. And now we're up to like 6 DAOs for the project to govern like different parts. And I think that's the future. And that's kind of like the Opolis strength, is melding the current state of
the bridge.
Payroll compliance. With the
it's the bridge. It's the bridge. I mean, if you think about it, the economic engine of everybody's commercial experience is their payroll. So how do you make that sort of compliant, but then give people this sort of fluidity and these options of sort of, having just more control over their commercial decisions. So let's get into. So I'm going to remind the audience here, if you have any questions, feel free to put a question in the Q&A. We're going to wrap up here probably in just a few minutes, and then we're going to move into Q&A if there is any, and we'll do that live on air here. So the last thing I want to kind of touch on with you, Bill, is your experience. Let's get more specific here. Like, tactically speaking, it's easy to say things like, well, it's just easy not to forget or to deal with any of this. But like your experience of like having to, how much interaction do you actually have to have with Opolis on a day-to-day basis? Yeah.
So on a day-to-day basis, other than like chatting with Joshua on Telegram about non-Opolis stuff, there's not much that I have to do day to day. I
set and forget it, baby.
Yeah, set and forget. And it's every once in a while I go view the dashboard. I get the emails and check them every couple of weeks when payrolls run. And that's the perfect amount of interaction with, a payroll provider.
For managing the administrative, ugly underbelly of necessary evils. Yeah, I think it's probably as little as possible, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And so that's been really good.
Comment on, your experience with the quality of the benefits offerings, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you're a live in the person, in the flesh, member, you're not a paid contributor. You're not anything to Opolis. You're just a guy, being a part of this community commons. Like, tell us about that.
Yeah. So, for the health benefits, my wife works for a health tech company that offers insane benefits. So that's where I go for her.
So you got the health benefits through her, But then
through her.
the payroll and everything else is.
Yep, the payrolls through Opolis. I also have like the life insurance and some of those other benefits that we don't like to think about.
Yeah.
Usually because they're like something bad happened to you.
Right.
But that was like really easy to set up and make the selection, and again, like set it and forget it. I mean, was there
anything that we didn't offer that you would have hoped that we would have, or that the Commons would have? Comprehensive.
Nope. Yeah, it was very comprehensive. I think the Commons offered pretty much all the same types of different benefits as our prior PEO did.
Okay, so let me kind of frame this a little bit differently. So does it feels then like you kind of work for someone else, like it would normally feel like if you had a job.
Yeah.
But you don't.
Right. Yeah.
It's you.
It's me, right? It's Peeps Democracy as my employer, but when it comes to doing all the admin, I get to pretend that Opolis is the employer, which is a nice way of doing it,
Well, it's a shared services stack, right? So like the idea is to not have some, centralized third party with some other interests, right?
Right. Yep.
Aside from just providing infrastructural support for individuals in the world of employment. Like I lovingly refer to it as a quasi public utility infrastructure for employment, right? Like
that's right.
Yeah, but it's also going to distribute value back to its contributors, right? So it's not a not-for-profit, which is why I say it's quasi-public utility infrastructure.
Yep.
Because it is a for-profit deal, except that it's for the profit of the membership.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's like a much more cooperative capitalism type setup, and that's really cool, and an added benefit for anybody looking for, a payroll provider solution, especially if you're a small company or an independent person, because like there are other places where you could just kind of set it and forget it, but you're not gonna there's no tokenization coming down the pipeline for those, for sure.
You're certainly never going to share in their the aggregate value creation of their ecosystem. No, that's definitely not happening.
Yeah.
That's like a hard pass. No, that's
yeah.
Well, great. That's fabulous. So, what's next for PoolParty, or what are the goals? How can we help?
Yeah. So PoolParty is launching as soon as possible. Probably reasonably next week, we'll have our alpha up on mainnet. Might be the week after if I run into a bug or something, but we're just cleaning up the front end and making sure it looks pretty and works well at the moment. And then from there, we're focused on two big things for PoolParty. One is reducing gas costs, because we want people to be able to use it easily.
Yeah, right now it's pretty tough.
Yeah. And the other thing is, just making it easier in terms of UI for cross-contract and cross-platform cooperation and iteration. Like too much DAOs have operated in kind of like their own little DAO bubble.
Their little vacuum, and they're not interoperable.
Yep. Yeah. So we're focused on interoperability, which is also kind of like a DAOHaus focus, and RaidGuild are all focused on like creating easy UI for cross-platform interoperability. And so those are the two things that'll also be coming down the pipeline, along with the party rewards token, which will be a cool way of starting to like seed the community and figure out like how we can be a community-driven project, which is the end goal, because it'd be a little oxymoronic to say like we're an application focused completely on community, but we're highly centralized and I make all the decisions. That's not what we want to be, and that's not our values.
Yeah, I understand that too. I mean, with the Commons, we sort of run into that every now and again.
Yeah.
We've set some thresholds for sort of the decentralization of decision making.
Yep.
based on sustainability and numbers and things. Because if you do it too early, a crowd of disparate views is not going to make any decisions that are going to really help advance anything. So it's a tricky thing, but good luck with that. So
thank you. Yeah.
I'm going to put out
also
another
focused on progressive decentralization. That's definitely the way.
I remember talking to Joe Lubin back in 2017, and he had told me, he's like, hey, we just really focus on full DApp, projects, and this was sort of their way of telling us that we weren't going to be doing a spoke thing, which, in hindsight, I think was really good for us to not do it. But, I admire a lot of the work that they did and a lot of the experimentation they did, because I think it led us, even him, to a place where it's like, well, this full DApp thing, I don't think really works right out the gate, right?
Yeah,
we've got to do something a little bit more sort of progressive. So the decentralization quotient and like all these other things that are kind of popping around. Yeah, I think it's the right strategy. I think without the sort of the orbital sort of inertia where you can kind of get out into the stratosphere. Without that,
that's right.
I don't think anybody can do it without being centralized, right? In some fashion. Yeah.
You need kind of like that early centralization to push you towards decentralization. Otherwise, you're right. Like the orbital escape is the right
it doesn't work.
Analogy.
Well, but the one thing that I really urge people to think about, though, is like the traditional centralized early incubation. When they look for money, it's challenging because they go to the centralized VCs who then have their own agenda. And then sort of the benevolence of the thing sort of gets messed up a little bit.
That is.
So I think that's the trick. How do you maintain early stage centralization, but also the benevolence, right? And then as you grow, making sure that benevolence stays in place is really the key. And that's where we found help in the legal framework. And not B Corp. Like originally I thought that, but then as you get into it, it's like, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. B Corps are well-intentioned, but not much more.
Very well-intentioned, and I think they're great for maybe even ESOPs or something that have like, some decentralization to them. And some virtue signaling needs, where they really want to be, sort of signaling their business is about some particular goal. But I think in the end, it sort of falls a little bit short. So one last call, final call for Q&A for questions for Bill and I. And I'm just going to keep talking and see if anything pops in here. If not, then we'll go ahead and sign off here in just a minute. Is there anything else that's on your mind? Anything that sort of perked your interest recently? Anything else? I mean, outside of the DAO space and the, sort of Peeps Democracy world?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that I should mention, and given all like the DeFi hype right now, is, we're definitely focused on doing a much more kind of like responsible DeFi. That's why it's, put your money into a PoolParty. It's goal focused. It's not about just earning interest or
arbitraging.
Right. Yeah. If you really want to do like a DeFi investment club with the PoolParty, that's a great use case, but it'll at least be very community driven. I think, and I hope that the DeFi space will get a little bit more responsible and focus on creating real value rather than, we're kind of the
crazy experiments that have, appealing food names.
Right. Yeah. And I think the novelty of like a bunch of fast copycat food apps has started to wear off. It's like, all right.
Well, I think after enough people kind of get burned on these things, I mean, this reminds me of a different flavor of 2017 sort of ICO stuff, where it's like, look, at the end of the day, if all you're trying to do is just give me the money, show me the money,
right,
and you're not building anything of real commercial value as
Yep.
far as metrics or business or engagement or
Yep.
members, customers, whatever, if you're not building something sustainable, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, or you're
That's just
just
the way
like
I
a Wall
got.
Street firm, you know?
Or you're just a new version of sort of like high velocity arbitrage.
Yeah,
And what value does that actually create,
right.
though? And I would argue the
Yeah,
same thing about Wall Street trading desks. Like I've got some good friends that are in commodities trading, and they do really well for themselves. But like at the end of my life, I don't want to just be known for that. Like that seems really
yeah,
boring to me. Like did I
Yep.
leave it better than I found it? And I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, again, no judgments, just go do your
Yeah,
thing. But like to
right.
me, the essence of life is really getting involved in this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and I think most people got excited in Web3 because it was supposed to be new and different from the old system, and we don't want DeFi to just be swap JP Morgan for food name, and
yeah,
that's
no,
the new
I totally
finance.
agree.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Well, Bill, it's been a pleasure. I
yeah,
really appreciate everything you're doing in the space.
yes, same goes here.
I appreciate your sort of authenticity and your heart for the space. Like it shows you're
Thank
one
you.
of you're one of the good guys in the space. So we appreciate you, and we're also glad to have you as a member of the Commons alongside us. So like it's great, and we will look forward to seeing PoolParty launched, and if you want to distribute to us the launch information when it comes, we'd love to distribute to our folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And any way we can be of service to you, just let us know. We'll appreciate it. We appreciate you, man.
Same goes for me. Big fan of the Opolis community and Commons, so always glad to help, and it's always great to chat with you.
Well, we'll be in touch on that front. I'm sure there's going to be plenty that we'll need your expertise on. As you know, we have a very, very sophisticated multi-layer cake here that we're building. So,
yeah.
Anyway, we appreciate you. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.